Hello humanity, this is actually a recording audio to go along with these 28 pictures stating hopefully the most impactful invention in the human history. And the whole thing started with the idea economy sparking a major change in the communication field between humanity near the end of the Second World War, around the 1940s, where the soldiers of the US Army and the British Army had difficulty communicating clearly with walkie-talkie and analog signals, and the communication was very limited to a narrow distance not exceeding a couple of kilometers. And in the meantime, this issue was researched for 5-6 years during the Second World War at Bell Labs, and a brilliant engineer by name Bill Shannon came up with the idea of what is called analog to digital converter, where we can actually digitize. That what he recommended is to really digitize the signal of the analog signal of sound into symbols of bits and ones and zeros, and reassemble them, transmit them with less error and less noise, and reconstruct these symbols transmitted with certain coding in the other side with a digital to analog converter, and that would expand the distance traveled of the signal. Experimentation showed that this invention was having a feature where a linear increase in the size of this symbol would have an exponential performance in the distance traveled with minimal noise error. With this, the birth of digital communication that changed the history of mankind, have been demonstrated. And of course, the automation of communication, where analog phones, you had to dial 10 times to make a call, while digital phones, you just touch, a button or a screen today, and that automation convenience obsoleted the analog communication. In fact, the beauty of these devices, 4-bit A to D would enable communication across a city, 8-bit efficiently across a continent, 16-bit, which is symbols across planet Earth, and 32-bit even outside planet Earth with satellites. So this was demonstrated where multi-billion-dollar per year business was sparked, across various companies and shared with a huge wealth between the companies that we know today in digital communication, where Nokia, Samsung, what we call client communication telephones, and teleoperators globally like Orange and Vodafone and so forth existed globally, and we today communicate freely with just a touch of a screen across the world. In the meantime, brilliantly, later by 10 years, a team of engineers won the Nobel Prize for applying the same principles to actually an electronic circuit that acts as a switch. And at that time, the transistor was born in 1956, which led with the same design benchmark feature where a linear increase in the size of the die of the transistor would have an exponential performance in the switch on-off time. And this sparked a revolution again in consumer electronics and obsoleted the vacuum tubes as a switch by heating the vacuum tubes, and the same thing applied. Transistors existed in many forms, shapes, and it started, integrated in all the radio equipments, in all, cassette tapes, in many electronic circuits, and it was a building block for actually building integrated circuits that revolutionized our life as we know it today. Then the transistor was actually conveniently, enhancing the implementation of A to D. So there was a recursive improvement loop between the transistor and the A to D, and the beauty here shows the same thing between, technology partners. They can enhance each other value to their customers. Dr. John von Neumann of MIT did the same revolution in computation by inventing what's called the microprocessor, where digital communication, digital computation replaced with a symbol, the analog computers that used to compute with a pulley and a mechanical movement. And of course the microprocessor as we know it is the main heart of all computational platforms today. And simulation software, where you model once and you compute forever, automated the deployment of computational platforms across mankind. And in the meantime, the same principle, an 8-bit microprocessor was able to solve the weather, prediction problem, and civil aviation was, born, and also simulation of heat equations of nuclear reactors. And today there is a 64-bit microprocessors in the heart of every computer or laptop. And beautifully, multi-billion-dollar business is now shared across players like IBM, Apple, Sony, Lenovo. Hardware and software empires was born because of this microprocessor birth. And of course, we know names like Google and Microsoft and Apple and so on in the computation business, because most of the industrial world either own a Windows PC or an Apple or an iMac. In the meantime, just innovation was silent for a while until Mr. Steve Jobs came with an innovative mechanism using the same benchmark with the iPod after he has been kicked out from his own original company that he founded, Apple Computers, where when he left it, it was the highest, at the peak. And then when he came back to it, that was in 1989. When he came back to it at 2000, it was almost near bankruptcy. And then he restructured the company completely to use what is called flash rewritable memory, to use the existing technology tools, and designed the best music player in the world, where you can carry 300 to 10,000 songs in your pocket. And the same design principle, where a linear expansion in the size of the iPod would actually make a huge improvement in the number of songs. And this linear to exponential performance role made the iPod replace all cassette tapes, CD-ROMs, DVD players, and it was really the revolution in the music industry and the birth of the giant technology company called Apple, where iTunes replaced blockbuster video stores, and many people, went back to digital music, replacing the analog music, and now even that is being used across the internet. So Steve Jobs, took his company with innovative idea like the iPod that he founded from 2000. Today we are 20 years later. It is the most, market cap valued company in human history at $2.5 trillion. And of course, many rollouts came like iPhone, iPad, and iMac was revived from the original Apple Macintosh Classic, where the innovation made it where it was in '89. Now we can summarize these, innovative, game changer products in two statements by Bill Shannon and by John Von Neumann, where Bill Shannon would say, if he is alive, if I communicate with a symbol instead of a waveform, then for a linear increase in the size of communication symbol, an exponential reduction in the error rate to decode the encoded message would happen. And that sparked almost $1 trillion a year business of communication market. The same thing, the computational business, with John Von Neumann would stand up proudly, which is the second revolution that he introduced. I call this the second revolution in computation as well, like the communication revolution. If I compute with a symbol instead of a gear and a pulley in the analog computers, then a linear increase in the state of computation will be an exponential reduction in the computational error. These beautiful inventions, have sparked my comparison, or our comparison of the, graviton machine, and that graviton machine would actually, make a huge difference in quote unquote, the energy sector or the power sector, where, we can say, if we use gravity, which is a natural available hidden force throughout the world with a constant value to generate power, and instead of the current 7 methods, it does have that feature of linear to exponential feature, a linear increase in the size of, quote unquote, the machine would actually have an exponential reduction in the project deployment time of a power station and also in the required land area. So this beauty with, in instant green energy, technology, which is a graviton machine, we are planning to roll it out with a partnership through Riskia.org and Norbu Group, and our first licensor for a couple of countries is, the famous, it's a good industrial company called Quantum Holding, and the target that we see that the graviton is the fastest platform to take humanity to a net zero and avoid all the problems of global warming by 2030. In fact, the physics equation that we design the graviton with is the generated power equal a mass times 1 kilowatt. We envision the graviton to be the marriage of classical physics and relativistic physics, and the graviton is going to be considered the transistor of classical physics and mechanical system design, where it is expected to disrupt 22 industries globally. We believe that the graviton will cause the same automation like the analog to digital converter and the microprocessor in the power generation sector, and will lead humanity to prosperity era where bottled water happened in the previous century. Now boxed electricity is going to happen in the 21st century, early on within the next year or two, and the automation of power generation will lead humanity to a prosperity era. In fact, the graviton is compared to the light bulb, where the light bulb took humanity to modern civilization by the ability to consume 1 watt every 10 cubic centimeter by Mr. Thomas Edison invention, and the IGE invention will take humanity to prosperity because we are now able to generate 1.7 watt of power every 10 cubic centimeter. In a nutshell, we can comfortably say if we generate electricity with an easy source like gravity, and instead of these 7 complex sources that is currently being used, then for a linear increase in the energy of the easy source, which is basically a linear increase, let us say in the land area, an exponential reduction would happen in the capacity and the power generation, and an exponential reduction in the deployment time and the needed space to deploy, the platform or the power station. Huge expected, business in trillions per year, because energy represents about 50% of the global economy annually, which is estimated to be 44 trillion today. And we strongly believe that the IGE graviton is the energy sector game changer machine. And an example comparison is now provided for a 6 megawatt distributed power station, where 3,600 square meter in the case of solar and wind is only reduced to 1 meter, and 240 days of construction time of a project is reduced to 1 day. With this, the same thing in a 10 megawatt, the higher you go in size, even the faster the impact is. So the graviton is scalable up to 10 megawatt, and that is, a huge, difference of the platform of an automation. In fact, this immediate slide here summarizes the 7 previous methods before the graviton as far as the needed space for a project of 1 gigawatt, the deployment time of the project, the setup cost, and annual profit or losses. Finally, the impact on the environment, where most of these, fossil fuel power stations was the main reason to cause global warming and all the disasters that we see today. And the graviton is the healing machine for the planet to take it back to a green planet. In a nutshell, IGE is really revolutionizing the energy industry with the graviton, and its founder can simply state that prosperity will be born with a 10x minimum return every hour, where Mr. Einstein said the famous statement, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And Mr. Steve Jobs said when he introduced the iPhone, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. However, we strongly believe that through our riskier licensing platform per country, we will heal the planet, and in the meantime, we will be watching for an exponential change in the history of humanity with this exponential growth, and we welcome you all to the new planet Graviton. Thank you very much.